Hey, Melissa, welcome to the podcast and thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, I've been, we talked several months ago, I guess, when I reached out to try and get you on. And yeah, I've been really excited to have you on because I think you have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to going through this process of embarking on an expat journey, practically speaking, how you actually do it and then living through it for several years like you have been. Yeah, and I think your experience would be really valuable to the listeners, and you literally wrote the book on moving to moving to New Zealand or wrote a book on it. So and I'll provide a link to for everyone on the in the show notes how to get to the book, but it's called So You Want to Move to New Zealand by Melissa Cox. You can get it on Amazon. But yeah, I mean, I read it. It's a very practical guide on, how to move to New Zealand in particular. But for me, I mean, I encourage everyone to pick this up and read it because it's not just for moving to New Zealand that I think it is valuable. Obviously, there's a lot of specific stuff about that country, but there's some broader things that you have to that'll resonate with just about anyone that's moving to another country or thinking about it that I found helpful. And I thought just to start, maybe I'll read a quote from your book and we can go from there if that works.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So um, right up front, there is one thing you need to know. You will never be 100% sure about your decision to move to New Zealand, and that is okay. Doubt is normal. I've been here nearly a decade, and some days I still am not sure it was the right move. And that's okay. But don't confuse doubt with something called analysis paralysis. Sometimes, when trying to make a really big decision, we can suffer from analysis paralysis. Wikipedia describes this phenomenon as what happens when the fear of either making an error or foregoing a superior solution outweighs the realistic expectation or potential value of success in a decision made in a timely manner. There is a high likelihood that you will encounter it when trying to decide whether or not you should move to New Zealand or anywhere else for that matter. That paragraph right there really resonated with me because I mean, thinking about moving, I mean, whether it's to a different city, different state, of course, if you're moving across the entire world to New Zealand, it's even a heavier position. But I was thinking maybe if you could just talk about that a little bit, your decision to move to New Zealand, and I know you had a lot of things involved in that decision based on the book, but yeah, kind of going through that process mentally, emotionally, and how you came to that decision.
Sure. So, a couple things. We moved to New Zealand 10 years ago, so in 2014, end of 2013, beginning of 2014. So that was before the pandemic and before certain people were in the White House. And that I wanted people to know that because there are a lot of reasons why people move to New Zealand. A lot of Americans moved to New Zealand during the pandemic. A lot of them. It seemed like a lot
Hmm.
more than before. So our decision to move, we had actually visited New Zealand, and I go into this in the foreword of my book. Um, we were visiting New Zealand in 2012 on holiday, on vacation, just for fun for 2.5 weeks, and we fell in love with the country. Um,
Yeah.
and we were already thinking about moving from the current United States state that we were in. So we lived in Maryland, but on the Delaware border, and we both had like jobs basically in Delaware. And so we were thinking about moving anyway. I was born and raised in Delaware, and I mean, 30 years of the same spot, I had kind of had enough. Personally, we were
Yeah.
looking at Colorado because we lived there for a short time, and we were looking into Hawaii, but it was too expensive and jobs were scarce. So, when we found New Zealand on holiday, we started learning about it. Now, that I actually say this in the book, if you can swing it, let's say you're thinking about moving to a country. It may be New Zealand, but it may be another country. Um, don't just go there without visiting first. I know that it's expensive to take a trip, and if you have kids and you need to find a babysitter for a week or two to go check that country out, I
Hmm.
highly recommend it. There are a lot of Americans just because of cost, because New Zealand is so far and so remote and so expensive to get to. that they don't come here first to check it out. They don't come here on holiday, what I like to call like a working holiday, which is like, you're not here to sit on the beach. You're here to um, go to the different areas of the country that you think you might want to live in and talk to people and look at the house listings and look at the job listings and look at the schools and look at the lifestyle and take notes. That is really what you want to
Yeah,
try to do.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, try to see like what would your life really look like, your normal everyday life look like in this place, as
Yeah.
opposed to staying in a resort on a
Yeah.
beach town. Not
Right.
the same experience.
Definitely not. And the other thing I want to say is we analysis paralysis, we suffered from that. My husband, I like to equate myself to like, I'm Tigger and my husband's a little bit like Eeyore. Or like he's like a
Okay.
cross between Winnie the Pooh and Eeyore. He's got a really good heart, but he's a little bit like, I don't know. Like, and me, I'm
Right.
just like, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. And we had analysis paralysis in that I couldn't make this decision unilaterally. I had to discuss this with my husband. This is before we had children. So I was like, we had many, many, many nights, long hours, like probably 150 hours of just talking, crying, fighting, um, writing out pro and con lists. So, I mean, it is not an easy decision, especially New Zealand, where it's a much further flight than, say, France or Spain or the UK.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I've been through that with my family, not in such a far move, but yeah, it's really hard because you have this excitement, especially right when you leave a place. There's this excitement about it, you miss it, but you go through waves just like we do in life with everything. Go through waves of emotions. Basically, it's like you're really excited about it, but then you start thinking about all the things, because there's obviously some good things about where you currently are. So that's why it's hard to make that decision, because you fall back on the easy. It's like it would be a lot easier to stay here, and there's some good things about it, and then there's the fear of, what if where we're going is actually worse? You don't know until you
And
do it. And that's what hard, I think.
and you know what, there are immigrants, not just Americans, who come here and it doesn't work out for them. And
Right.
we absolutely, when we came here, we gave the kind of visa my husband got, it gave him 9 months to find a job. It was like a job search visa. And then that job search visa, if he got a job offer that was a qualified job, would transfer to a 2-year work visa. And then from there, we worked through the visa process to citizenship, and that took 8 years. Um,
Okay.
the thing is, though, like, if he had not found a job on his job search visa in 9 months, New Zealand would have been like, okay, bye.
Yeah, that's
See ya.
stressful. Yeah.
And we had to save for that, and we had to prove to the New Zealand government we had enough money to leave. Like, you have to show a bank account that actually has enough money in it to get out. And then the other thing too is, like, there are people in this country whose spouses or partners got a job offer, like especially medical jobs, where, like, I know someone whose wife is a doctor, and hold on, my thing's breaking. Where his wife is a doctor, and he was like, I will be fine. I will be able to find a job because I'm a software engineer, and he's had a very hard time. So you have to kind of weigh everything up.
Yeah, I mean, it is a leap of faith at the end of the day. You do what you can to get as much information possible, so that it's not maybe as risky a leap of faith. At least, like you said, go to the place, try to visualize yourself being there. If it's a closer place, maybe you go a couple times to different places. I agree with you, but yeah, at the end of the day, you don't know. It's an adventure, and you have to be up for it, and it's not going to be all easy. I imagine. I'm sure you ran into
Yeah.
plenty of roadblocks throughout the process.
There's one other thing that I want to say about that, and that is, if you're gonna go, and then if you have to have a game plan for coming back if it doesn't work out. Now, luckily, we
Hmm.
had supportive parents, and they said, look, if it doesn't work out, you can live with us for a couple months to get back on your feet.
Right.
If you came back, but not everybody has that. I know people who sold everything they owned, their houses, their cars, their furniture. They sold everything and they came over here, and then like within a year they couldn't find jobs, or they didn't like the culture. They didn't feel like they made a lot of friends. That's actually a problem here. Kiwis are very
Hmm.
closed off people, and they don't make a lot of friends who are outside of their circle, because it's only a country of 5 million people. So they don't feel like, it's not the same vibe as like social butterfly America, I feel. So they are
Right.
lonely, and then they have just sold everything. They sold their whole life. And then they're like, oh my God, how are we going to start all over again to go back to America? Because we don't want to stay here. You have to have
Hmm.
that place to land if you do want to go back. And so when you're planning a trip, or when you're planning a move overseas and planning to move abroad, be very candid with your family and friends, and then ask, look, if it doesn't work out, can we stay with you guys for a month or two to get back if we have to come back here? Yeah, you don't
Right.
want to land flat-footed in
Right.
America again.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about why New Zealand. Had you been there? You did the 3 week or 2 week uh, stay there. Was that your first time there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Y-
That's cool. So
Um,
what was it about New Zealand that kind of drew you?
so I think, again, this actually, I kind of actually ended up working like a working holiday, even though when we went to New Zealand, we were just backpacking and staying in hostels around the South Island. Um,
Okay.
and and then, but I'm a very talkative person. I'm a very curious person. And so I talk to people. And as
Hmm.
I was talking to people, I was running into a lot of immigrants who were also on holiday. And some of them were either on just working holidays for like a year, but some of them had moved full time. And they were from all over the world, not just America. And I learned things. So number one, I found out that New Zealand is the only country in the world that has done tort reform. What that
Hmm.
means is they have basically outlawed most lawsuits, most like, it's not litigious here. And as an
Yeah.
American, my mind exploded
Yeah.
because
Very, very different than here. I went and grabbed a cup of coffee earlier from my office in Mobile, Alabama, where I live, and I probably walked by 8 law offices within 2 blocks. You know,
yeah,
so it's a culture.
yeah. Now, a lot of people say to me, "Well, wait a minute. If you can't sue anybody, what if you get hurt?" And the answer to that is, when New Zealand did tort reform back in 1978, they they replaced the right to sue with something called the Accident Compensation Corporation. Now, corporation is a
Mm.
little bit of a misnomer, um, because it's actually partially run by the government and it's tied in with your taxes. So I don't want people to get the idea that Accident Coverage Corporation means it's a private entity. It's a government entity, and basically what it means is every single person on New Zealand soil, from citizen all the way to tourist, if you get hurt here and it's accident related, your medical expenses are covered up to 100%. And if you are a tax paying worker in New Zealand, y-
Mhm.
your your salary can be covered up to 100%. Now, I want to give a good example of this. So, because a lot of people think accidents like a car accident, and that's covered. But I want to give you a really like specific example of somebody that I know. I'm not going to say his name, but he's actually one of the most famous singers in New Zealand right now. But when this happened to him, he wasn't. He was just a guitar teacher at my music school, and
Mhm.
that where I teach. So he took out mason jar and was putting the cap back on it. He took it out of a hot um, dishwasher, and as he was screwing the cap on, it broke and went right through his hand. And it's like he couldn't play guitar. Now, what would have happened in America? He was a self-employed musician doing like the wedding circuit, like playing gigs and teaching music to kids. A lot of Americans would either have a super high deductible with their insurance because that's all they can afford, either through their employer insurance or through through the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
All he did was say, "I accidentally hurt myself." He submitted some accident coverage, Accident Compensation Corporation (ACC) paperwork, and then also gave the ACC all of his gigs that he couldn't play that upcoming summer because he had like a whole roster of weddings he was supposed to play. And wedding money is like wedding gigs are like how he pays his bills. And he goes, "I can't play any of these." And they're like, "Okay, no problem." They checked that he had been paying his ACC levies over the years, so that's just ACC taxes, and that is a portion of your income as a self-employed person. And you don't have to pay them if you make under a certain threshold. So like you're not going to make you pay it if you make under like $5,000 a year, because at that point you're destitute. And so he had been paying it, and they're like, "Cool, you're good. You've already been paying your quote unquote insurance or your ACC levy, so we're gonna cover all of your medical bills and all of the gigs that you can't play at 100%." Now he is the most famous musician in New Zealand. He got very
Right.
lucky
You didn't
because
have
there
to sue
was that
anyone.
safety net, and he didn't have to go find a lawyer.
Right. Yeah. So it works kind of like insurance in a way.
It works like insurance, but here's the thing. Like, what happened if like the insurance, like let's say if it was like insurance, the insurance is like, "You're an idiot and you put a glass mason jar through your hand." We're not going to pay for that. Like, we're not going to cover that. Or what if they say, "Yeah, okay, we'll pay for it, but you know that you have a high deductible of $2,000. You have to pay that first." It doesn't work like that here. It is very much like, and it evens out the playing field. There are things obviously they will not cover. Like if you are drunk and you get in a bar fight, they're not going to cover you. Like it's an accident. No, it's not. You were stupid. Like you were not you were doing something illegal. They also won't cover for things like drunk driving because they don't want to subsidize illegal behavior. So there's rules around it. Other reasons why I moved here real quick, obviously we have universal health care with the option to top up that health care with private insurance, which I have, because it's actually really cheap. For a family of 3, me, my husband, and my son, we only pay $400 a month for private insurance. Then we can get all kinds of stuff done. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big difference in the U.S. for sure. The U.S. is tough from a healthcare. I do taxes for a living in the U.S., which is confusing, and healthcare boggles my mind in the U.S. I can't make sense of it just because there's no, to me, there's a lot of problems, but it's so hard to put a value, like compare, like for me, I'm always trying to compare the value of what you're receiving versus what you're paying. Just as an accountant, that's the way my brain works. And I cannot match that up in the US. And that's a huge problem for me. And yeah, so that's a good trade-off. Assuming the healthcare is good.
Look, look, I know someone who has been diagnosed with a very bad form of cancer. And if you have stage 4 cancer here, they're pretty much putting you in a hospice if you're older. They're not going to try to save you if you're older enough. And so that's sad. They don't have certain drugs here for certain cancer drugs. And that's because we have something called Pharmac. And they have to basically it's the only kind that it's in the world where they have a certain pool of money that is allocated for buying drugs at wholesale prices from other countries like the United States. We pay less here for drugs than the United States does, even though the drugs are made in the U.S. So because they have bargaining power. But there are drugs that you can't get here because of that. And there are a lot of people saying who are lobbying the government to say you need to get these cancer drugs because
Yeah.
we can't get them here. I got to go over to the United States and pay out of pocket for them. And that's what a lot of people do. So, but on the other hand, as you can see what's going on with the Dobbs decision, I had a miscarriage and I got help immediately. So it's sort of like what's going on in America from a healthcare perspective for women scares the living bejesus out of me. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are looking at that. So when you say, is it good healthcare? I would just say it's different. Not
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, and so the private top-up type insurance, is the main benefit of that time? Like it
yes,
saves you time more
yes,
than anything.
uh-huh,
It's
yep.
quality
And
in both situations. Is that true? Like get the same doctors generally, or
no, so actually, I'll give you a good example. I found a lump on my breast. I was fine. I had been breastfeeding for 3 years, so something was bound to happen. But of course, when you feel a lump, you got to go get it checked out. And I went to my
Sure.
doctor and I said, I have a lump. And she goes, oh, okay, well, you can get a mammogram done. And that's about it. And that's it. And we'll check it. But we know that mammograms aren't 100%, right? And then I went, oh, no,
Yeah.
no, no. I have private insurance too. She goes, oh, well, also, she said, you can get a mammogram and you have to wait 2 months. This was near the pandemic, though, so I think the wait times have gotten better.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she said, oh, wait, you have private insurance? Okay, actually, you can get the mammogram, but you can also get an ultrasound, and we'll do blood work, and we'll do an MRI, and you get to see the specialist in person, and we can get you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, it's,
that's a pretty significant difference. So it's time
yeah,
and yeah.
yeah. And I was fine. And it was like a huge weight off my shoulders. But if I had to been living with that lump for 2 months, I would have been like a nervous wreck for so long. In
Right.
America, those wait times are starting to creep up on people because we're losing so many medical personnel in the field.
Mhm.
And, it's just becoming so expensive for people to get stuff done that they just don't bother to get it done. So,
Yeah. Yeah, what's crazy in the US, which I'm sure there's a good reason for this, but like I broke my nose a few years ago and had to have surgery.
ouch.
And like if I didn't have insurance, the cost of the surgery was like $10,000 just to get my nose fixed. With insurance, the cost was $3,000. And then
So,
I have to pay the deductible, but it's the same procedure.
yeah.
And it's 3 times more if you don't have insurance. And I guess it's just the bargaining power of the insurance companies and the economics behind all that. But it's just,
It's a
yeah,
wreck.
it's hard to
It's
move
a
them. Yeah,
for-profit. It's a for-profit system. Healthcare here
yeah,
is not for profit. We don't give like the insurance companies have to make some money because that they're going to be paying your claims, but it's a not for profit. Now I will tell you because I have many, many, many friends who are doctors and nurses in this country who are
yeah,
Americans. You will make as a doctor or an OBGYN or as a pediatrician in America far more because
right,
in New Zealand your salary is on like a grading system and it's like being in the Department of Education in America where like they have tiers of payment, right? Because you're
right.
working for the federal government as a teacher in a public school system. It's like that here
Mm,
for medical doctors, for anyone in medicine. And so you can make far more money in America as a doctor or a nurse, but you have to pay exorbitant amounts of medical malpractice insurance for yourself. So that's the trade-off, and also quality of life. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
right.
So
Which I guess is your other, like, I mean, so we have, yeah, I mean, so you mentioned, the tort reform and the healthcare being positives in your case, moving to New Zealand. But I'm sure the lifestyle is a big part of it too, right? I mean, if you're an outdoorsy person, New Zealand might be one of the best places on earth, I would imagine.
it's pretty amazing. And there's something for everyone here. If you like skiing, you can get to the
Yeah.
ski fields. Like New Zealand's one of those places that you're actually never more than an hour and a half from the ocean. It's because we're a very skinny country and we're surrounded by water. So right
Uh,
there, that's amazing. Um,
yeah.
if you want to go skiing, there's ski fields. I could drive. I live at the beach right now where we don't get any snow and it never gets below freezing because we're in a subtropical climate. But I could
Yeah.
drive 2 hours right now and go skiing in the mountains. So it's like a completely, it's crazy. There are, drawbacks to the lifestyle here. As an American, there's a huge culture shock, and I have put this in my book. You want Amazon same day, you're not getting it. There's
Right.
one Costco in the whole country, and it's in Auckland, the biggest city. If you don't live near Auckland, you better figure out where you're going to get your Costco style stuff. There,
I think I remember reading in your book you said something like, when you feel homesick, that's your go-to. You go to Costco and kind of feel the Americanism for a minute, and then go
yeah,
back to your life.
yeah.
Yeah, that
Um,
makes sense.
it's there's if you are as what I always kind of tell people is like you have to actually ask yourself, what kind of person are you? Are you a farmer or are you a city person?
Hmm.
Don't like actually that pertains to anything, even if you live in America.
Yeah.
If you're a city person and you want to like go get a bagel at midnight, don't move don't move to my town. Don't move to my
Right.
town. Don't like I live in Tauranga, which only has about 100,000 people, and that's big for New Zealand. We're the fifth largest city. But good luck finding any cafe that's open past 2 o'clock. Every single shop, the pharmacies, they close at 5. The supermarkets close at 7 or 8 o'clock. The bars close at 10. On the weekends during the summer, they might close at midnight. There's no nightlife here. You have to ask yourself, what kind of lifestyle do you want? On the flip side, if you cannot stand traffic and you cannot stand noise, don't move to Auckland, the biggest city,
Hmm.
because the traffic there is like on par with, it's not as bad as Washington, D.C., but it's close.
Yeah. What would it be like moving from like urban city US to somewhere like Auckland? Like if you're like in a big city US like DC or LA LA is just too massive to compare, I guess.
Well,
But
actually, I will tell you that Auckland feels more like LA
yeah.
because of the proximity to water and beaches.
Okay.
Um, And then if you can kind of get out of LA once you get through the traffic, you can get to like beautiful parts of rural California pretty easily from LA, and like beach
Right.
beach towns. That's what Auckland feels like to me. Look, if you move from New York City to Auckland, you're going to be bored out of your mind, or you'll feel less stressed and less
Right.
claustrophobic. But if you love New York, well, I'm sorry, there's not many places in the world that compare to New York. So,
Mhm.
I
Okay.
I don't think you might like Auckland, but after a couple of months, you might be like,
Right. Right. Yeah. So it's setting your expectations. Know what you like and know what you're getting into.
yeah.
Do you
Or
like a
you know
smaller
what?
town?
Or know what you like, but at the same time, just be adaptable. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like be open to the possibility that maybe you might like something different. You know what I mean? But what I wouldn't say is if you're coming from New York and you like the New York City lifestyle, maybe don't move to Cary, which is tiny. You know,
Yeah.
don't move to Taupo. Like, don't move there. Like you unless you won't have a good time.
I think adaptability is really the key because at the end of the day, it's a different country, it's a different culture, and
Yeah,
regardless of if you try to match the city up or not, it's not going to be the U.S. and it's not trying to be, and it doesn't want you to try to make it the U.S.
yeah,
So yeah, it's being able to adapt and being open to yeah to
yeah.
that type of lifestyle.
Real quick, did you say you needed to get going? I just want to make sure you're not late.
No, yeah, I have plenty of time. We have
Oh,
like
okay.
40 minutes or so.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry, you said 5:30. What time is it there right now?
4:39.
Oh, sorry, I did the math wrong.
No, we're good. Um, yeah, yeah. So I think it's yeah, adaptability is huge on the
Hmm.
move. But
Yeah.
yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I understand. You know, in your case, I mean, those are the three biggest things. Would you say, kind of just the culture of the legal system, the lifestyle, and healthcare being a big piece of it, and
I
then
have to add one more to that, and that was, well, two things. It has to do with raising a child. So, I went in my foreword of my book. I talked about how right when we came here on holiday to visit New Zealand without any plans to move here, Sandy Hook happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it just rocked me. I was like, what is going on? This is not cool. And my husband and I were thinking about starting a family. I was 30 at the time. And so, you know, so here, uh, maternity leave and no guns in schools.
Yeah.
We have, I mean, knock on wood, we haven't had a school shooting ever. And of course, it's still a problem because the Christchurch shooting of Muslims in two mosques down in Christchurch happened in
Uh-huh.
I can't remember the year. It was 2019, and it was devastating. But the difference there was that they banned assault weapons with unanimously in a multi-party parliament and put stricter controls on gun ownership in this country to deal with that. And it happened in 2 weeks. They did it. And I just keep seeing what's going on in America. And I'm just like, how can I send my kid to school? I will be worried sick all the time. And also the maternity leave. I'm a self-employed musician, music teacher, and so I got at the time it was 5 months, but they've bumped it up to 6 months. I got 5 months paid maternity leave from the government. Now people will say in America, well, that's a handout if you're not working for an employer. Well, no, I am my own employer and I pay taxes.
Right.
My taxes paid for my maternity leave. And I had to prove the year prior I had income. If I had been a self-employed person and I made no money the year prior, I probably would have gotten maternity leave, but it would have been like $20 a week, like nothing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That
Yep.
you have to justify that you are a tax-paying person who is contributing to the economy of this country. And when you have a child, the government understands that um, that all the studies show maternity leave is not a handout. It is actually a buffer against things like infant mortality, maternal depression and postpartum depression, maternal suicide. It increases breastfeeding success. Uh, it reduces the number of times a mother and or the baby end up in the ER within the first year. Paid maternity leave has been shown to actually increase the IQ of babies whose mothers get paid maternity leave.
Right.
And then also things like it's less poverty, less crime, because that kid actually has a stronger bond to the parent. Therefore, they're less likely
Mm-hmm.
to get into the juvenile justice system. I researched all of this because I think that people have this misunderstanding in America that maternity leave is just a handout. It's not just maternity leave, it's paternity leave for fathers. It's it's paid parental leave for
Mm-hmm.
heterosexual or gay couples, and we need to prioritize it. When I looked at that, I was like, well, obviously that's a benefit. I'm not going to get that anywhere in America, even if I'm working for a good employer. Because at the time I was working for a really good employer, they offered zero maternity leave. And it
Uh-huh.
made me angry. I was just like, I'm not going to do this. So, a lot of people, it's funny, a lot of people from Britain come over here and complain about the maternity leave because you apparently get more maternity leave in the UK. And in Canada, you
Uh-huh.
get a year. I think you get a year in the UK. And they're always complaining, like,
Uh-huh.
oh, I only got 6 months. I'm like, do you have any clue? How much do you get in America? Zero.
Right.
And they're like,
Right.
oh, really? And I'm like, yeah, you have no clue. Stop whining.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a
Yeah.
big one for me.